Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our first speaker series of the academic year. My name's Faye, and I'm a prefect at PGS. So to start the series, we've asked our new head, Mr. Wickes, who's our first guest speaker. And outside of his teaching career, Mr. Wickes has been involved in the development of many young rugby players, many of whom you should probably be able to see on your screen. We will also be holding a Q&A at the end, so please use the chat tab throughout to enter your questions, and then we'll lead the Q&A afterwards. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Wickes for this PGS speaker series.
Hey, thanks very much indeed, and good evening everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm going to talk in a short while about the work that I've done with some talented young rugby players, or more perhaps better put, the way I've got out of their way and allowed them to be as talented as they can be. But before I get to that, I thought I would just give a little bit of précis of my own very short and not particularly successful playing career, and then how I got into coaching. So I went to school not very far from here in a city that probably shouldn't be named, at a school which I know is a strong rival of PGS, and I was introduced to rugby there. I played for a number of years and was very fortunate to be reasonable at the game. I remember with trepidation having to come to Hilsea a few times to play PGS. They were very strong in my year group, and I think in my 7 years of playing we only managed to overcome them once. But I was picked up and played a little bit of county rugby for Hampshire for the 15s, 16s, 17s, 18s and 19s, and played with a number of PGS boys at the time. In particular, I remember Martin Duff and Ed Anderson and Simon Lippiott, who it was a real pleasure for me to meet on Saturday when he accompanied a relative to a reunion of the 1960s rugby players, and it was great to reminisce with him about some of the times we had when we were younger. I went on to university, and then I decided I wanted to be a teacher, and it quickly dawned on me that if I wanted to be a teacher in the kind of schools I wanted to work in, what I needed to do was say that I wasn't going to play rugby, but I was actually prepared to coach rugby and take teams on Saturdays. And the first school that I said that at, I was fortunate to be offered a position, and that school was Dulwich College, and I owe a great deal to that school for what it did in terms of my rugby career. When I arrived at the school, the first team was a rather strong first team, arguably one of the strongest schoolboy teams in the world. It had a number of players that might be household names. So in particular, David Flatman, who you'll have seen play for prop for England, and also Andrew Sheridan, who was part of a fearsome pack that included 3 boys that played for England under 18s, and a number of backs also played for England under 18s, and that was a team that also included Johnny Wilkinson, to give you that pedigree. And having spoken with some staff here, I'm pretty confident that Mr. Payne, the senior deputy head, played against some of those boys in divisional rugby and certainly felt the awesome power of somebody like Andrew Sheridan. But I was very fortunate, and there was a fantastic coach there called Ian Martin, and he was involved in the England rugby setup and involved with London Irish, the professional club. And it was a real privilege to spend time watching him coach and to learn from him. He allowed me to coach the second 15, and then he allowed me to coach the under 16s. And one day he received a phone call from a gentleman who said that London division, at that time England was split into 4 divisions, the North, Midlands, the South West and London division. They were in need of a coach at rather short notice to come and do some skills work with them, and Ian very kindly recommended me. So I travelled up to North London to be involved in a session with London division, and I took the session, and they clearly liked what they saw, and they took me on board as a skills coach. And then the head coach got promoted to be the England A coach, so I moved to be the backs coach, and then the year after, the head coach got promoted to be an England selector. And so after 2 years, I found myself as a person in my late 20s as head coach of London division, much to my surprise. In my time as head coach of London division, we never lost a game. which you could say was down to my coaching, but probably wasn't. I think London Division had the biggest population in the country, so we were choosing from the most players. And if I tell you the names of some of the players that came through, you'll understand why we did pretty well. So I had the privilege of working with Tom Youngs when he was still playing in the backs, his brother Ben. Also got to work with Daniel Cipriani, who was a very special and talented player, Dominic Waldock, Jordan Turner-Hole, and a host of other boys. And indeed, in one year, in 2005, the entire England backline plus the subs, apart from the scrum half, came from London Division. Because I seem to have done reasonably there, in 2006 I was appointed to be the England coach with responsibility for skills and analysis, and I was able to take up that position in 2007. And if you just bear with me, I will just share my screen and you'll be able to see the team that I began to work with. So these were the young men who were the England team in 2007, and if you spend a little bit of time looking at them, you may notice some familiar faces. Some of those boys are 15, some of them are 16. You will recognise them, hopefully, as pretty talented young men, some of whom have gone on to make a very successful career in the professional game. And I suggest as we go through this presentation, and as you look at the photos and you look at some videos that I've got for you later, you might try and see if you can recognise any of the players and see how many of them you can recognise that have gone on to play for their country or to play a significant role for their professional clubs. So this is me, and this is to prove really that I was there, looking ever so much younger, and I'm flanked by two very good friends now, but two coaches. So on the left of the screen is a gentleman called Tim Bennett, who was the England forwards coach, and on the right of the screen is Phil Stanlake, who at the time was the England backs coach, but who was later brought on to be the full England coach. This man here is Gareth Rees. He was the head coach when I was first appointed, and he was a particular mentor of mine, taking over where Ian Martin left off. And Gareth is somebody who has the highest standards that I've come across in rugby. His ability to analyse the game was second to none, and his attention to detail was minute. He was very keen to develop his coaches, which meant helping develop me. And I remember him watching one of my sessions, and he did a write-up afterwards, and he was highly critical of large parts of my session. I remember once when I was a deputy head, a teacher coming to see me, a young teacher who just had lesson observation, and he'd received some criticism, and he was a little bit downhearted by it. So I actually pulled out the piece of paper that Gareth had written about my coaching session, put it in front of this young teacher, and he read it. And he read it and said, "Oh my goodness me, how did you survive? How did you come back from that?" And I said to the young teacher, what you need to understand is that the person that's analysed me, Gareth Rees, he actually loves me. He wants me to be the best coach that I can be. So he's not going to tell me about all the things that have gone well. He's going to criticise my session and encourage me to improve. And I learned huge amounts from him. And I have to say that his service to the players that we came across was second to none, and it is because of him and through him that so many of them have enjoyed such a successful career. So what do we used to do with England players? Well, we used to have a relentless focus on the basics. It's as simple as that. These are extremely talented young men, but we focus on their skill set. Can they carry out their skill set under the most intense pressure? So that means that we hammer the basics. A simple session like this, but it's so important. You can see players reaching for the ball. They're shaping their hands early. These are little things, but they make a huge amount of difference, because when you're under intense pressure at international level, you need to be able to do these things. Of course, these young men are skillful players. They can do a great deal, but ultimately, they need to be able to perform the basics under the most intense pressure. So this is what we would do. time and time again, and we would increase the pressure levels on them by increasing the speed, increasing the intensity we'd wish them to perform at, increase the opposition. But it is about focusing on the basics, repetition, so muscle memory comes. When it would come to things like scrums, again, it's all about the basics, simple things done well, but can you perform under pressure? A particular favourite of mine would be this photo here. Lineouts are beloved of photographers. They appear in newspapers, in magazines and on school websites. But very often, if you look at it, the lineout is done awfully. And this is just a simple example of something done well. Look at the two guys lifting. Look at their body position. Look at where their heads are. They're not looking up in the air, they're getting full extension. And it's by focusing on things like this, we can encourage players to perform at the highest level. And what I hope to share with you now is what happens when we encourage boys to work on their skills and that they can perform at the highest level. This was my first international game of rugby as a coach. I'd conducted the warm-up for them, and we'd gone over and hammered the basics relentlessly. And then they went out to perform against Wales, the old enemy, a grudge match. And this is the start of our international campaign of this year. I hope you enjoy what you see. Up on my computer.
Come over here, now scream. I'm a burning effigy of everything I used to be. You're my rock of empathy, my dear. So come on, let me entertain you. Let me entertain you. Last is enough for you to die. So grab yourself an alibi. Heaven knows your mother lied. Won't you? Separate your eye from wrongs. Come and sing a different song. The cattle songs to devil.
So that was my first experience of international rugby, and a 32-10 victory at any level is pretty impressive. And indeed, it was the biggest victory for a number of years over Wales. But it came through the preparation that we'd put in and the focus on the basics. That was our first victory. We then went on to play France. France were an under-17 team and were particularly large, and so therefore the focus on the basics was going to be even more important. And we were able to perform at a pretty high level. We were able to withstand a huge amount of physical pressure. We were able to defend with great gusto, and the boys rightly were able to win that game of rugby. And so 2 internationals, 2 victories, and we moved on to our final international, which was at Castlecroft, which was then the home of England Schoolboy Rugby. It doesn't exist anymore, and this was our game against Italy. And once again, the boys performed superbly well, really adhering to the basics, and were able to go through and win. Now, the second thing that why we're able to produce high levels of performance with these young men is their sense of togetherness, and this is symbolised in this photograph here. This is at the end of the season after that game against Italy, and the boys have just been through a cap presentation, and they always say that winning your first cap is special, and for a number of these boys this is their special cap. It might be the only time they play international rugby. For others, they've gone on to win countless caps, full caps for their country, but their first cap is special. That sense of bonding, something they all share together. It's something that's really important in team sport, but very much at the forefront of rugby, a game where you have to physically put your body on the line for your teammates. And it creates a close bond because of that. And obviously at the end of the season, we'd spend a lot of time with each other, weekends away in hotels on training sessions. And this was the end of a week, a long week campaign. And you can see, I'm sure, in the photograph, images of people that you may have seen as they've gone on to have professional careers. But this is something that the boys remember for the rest of their life. And indeed, we can meet up with some of the boys, they're men now, and they still remember this. They still remember the times they had as England under-16s, and they remember that sense of togetherness. But one of the reasons they also remember it is because of the preparation that we went through. It's something that we would do as a team and prepare. That successful Grand Slam season didn't just happen by chance. A lot of time and effort was put in, a lot of preparation. And one of the things we would need to do is go through warm-up games. And this is the following season. So this is now a season on. In the main, it's a whole new bunch of players. There are only 1 or 2 players that remain, particularly talented players, because they've obviously played as under-15s at under-16 level. And as part of our campaign, we would have warm-up games against Premiership sides. So this is us playing against Saracens. And I'll just share this video with you, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what we did.
Ain't no illusion. Try to click with what you got. Taste every potion. Cause if you like yourself a lot, go let it out. Go let it in. And go let it out. Life is precocious in the most peculiar way. Sister psychosis, don't got a lot to say. She gon' let it out. She gon' let it in. She gon' let it out. How's that cape of illness sort of breeze? Ordinary people that are like you and me, we're the builders of that destiny. We're the builders of that destiny. We're the builders of that destiny. We're the builders of that
Now again, there's a video. I should apologise about possibly the quality of the videos. They are they're videos that I made as part of the my role in the side, putting them together. And if you don't like the taste in music, I apologise for that as well. Why would we put those videos together? Well, partly they're for motivation, but also they're trying to emphasize those basics, those key skills that I spoke about earlier. And whilst people might look at some of those long passes that were going in, they're not necessarily why we would show it. We would look to the offload game that had happened, or the maul that was set up that you saw in an earlier photograph, which essentially shows us doing the basics. And then there's those lovely sets of handling, the shorter passes, where players are reaching for the ball, taking it early and moving it on. And the other thing we would show is that you can attack from anywhere on the pitch. Just recognise what is in front of you. But preparation is key. We focus on the basics, but also it's more than that. And when you're working with these talented young players, it's about showing them processes, helping them to excel beyond their already high standards. And we would do so as a team, and we would do so as individuals. So here's some presentations that we will go through now, and I've got some slides from some various presentations just to show you the kind of thing that we would do with them in sessions in the evenings. So here we have very clear what you need to do. Have goals, be precise, be prepared mentally. Take some time before the session to focus in on what you want to achieve. When we were away with England, we had limited amount of time. We had, perhaps 3 weekends. So we'd arrive on the Friday and we would train Friday, Saturday, and then we would have a game, a warm-up game on the Sunday. So we needed to get the most out of every session. So to do so, you needed to be focused. And if we are training for the entire weekend, you can't train every minute of every day. We would have to do 70-minute sessions, very focused. So we needed to make the most out of it. We also spoke about imagery. Visualization, sometimes called, really important. See yourself doing it in your mind, prepare your mind for it. And we would spend time doing this. And then also in the evenings, we would talk about these other things, distraction, mood and stress control. So we would do things like help the boys sleep at night. We would go through some mindfulness practice with them so they would be able to fall asleep. We would seek to mimic stressful situations, see how they responded and give them coping strategies. Because ultimately, these were young men, these are 15, 16-year-olds, and these are things that can be taught. They were eager, they had high physical competency, but sometimes that mental side of things we needed to work on, because we are helping prepare people to play at the highest level. And at the highest level, it's often your ability to mentally work under pressure, which is key. And if we look at these goal setting tips, for those of you who are watching who are pupils at the school, they're pretty simple and pretty similar to what you should be doing around your academic subjects. Write goals down. Focus on performance, not on outcome. We were very, very keen to emphasize this. It's about the process. Look at the process. Focus on the little things. Put a series of little things together and you get a bigger thing. But don't get ahead of yourself. Don't think about the big thing. Think about the smaller things. And let's get there in steps. And as a result, we were able to produce a high-performing team. And you can see some of the things there, that shared responsibility we spoke about, that togetherness. We were task-focused together. We firmly believed that actually we were based around principles, and we were consistent with our principles about what we did, how we did things. And that bottom one there, really important. All of the coaches, they were all school teachers. They were all school teachers. But we wanted to ensure that school was left where it was, and when they came to the England weekend, that's what they focused on. But that very last thing there, be thankful for friends and family. Understand the journey which has got you where you are and appreciate the people that have done that. Because we believe that making people better people would also make them better players on the pitch. We would also have a charter which the players would put together. But as you can see, there's that sense of being as professional as we can be, even though we're 15, 16-year-old. But there was responsibilities for individuals within that and responsibilities as a team. Pride is something that we spoke about a lot. I would have liked to have shown you a video which had Proud by people, or Heather Small, which we often used as a backing track to some of the things that we did, but I'm afraid those videos are on a hard drive which is currently in a storage unit in Manchester with lots of my other furniture at the moment. But we spoke about pride because there's that sense of personal responsibility. You needed to do this. You needed to do this. But of course, by doing this, by all of us doing this, by coming together, we had a chance of being excellent together. But we didn't shy away from it. If you want to perform at the highest level, you need to be ruthless. That doesn't mean you're a nasty person. It means you need to be totally committed and dedicated, because that's what it takes to be successful at the highest level. And these were young men who were prepared to commit to this. But we also spoke about having that challenging environment. Each weekend we had to push them harder and harder and harder. We had to take them beyond their comfort zone, take them out of their comfort zone in order to prepare them to perform. The Australian swimming coach, Bill Sweetnam, would say, train above to perform below, i.e. you're training so hard that even if your performance drops below, you're still going to be successful. And this is what we did. And of course, the players we're working with, they are skillful players, and therefore they thrived on challenge. So we made it difficult for them, but we made it enjoyable for them as well. Lots of team games, lots of small-sided games. And then we'd be able to pull out individuals and speak to them about their game. So one of my jobs after an international was I'd cut the game of rugby up into various different sections. So that would be unit skills, whether that be the forwards or the backs, line out scrums, but also individuals. So each individual will be able to watch his game. He'd be able to watch all his contributions to the game. And then we'd sit down with each individual player and go through it. And I have to say that the boys at this level, they are their own worst critics. Daniel Cipriani, if you watched a game with him, he would tear his game to pieces. And actually, it was a case of sometimes of saying, actually, you're better than that, Dan. Some of these things are really good. George Ford used to walk around with a diary, a thick diary. He would keep a training diary, a nutrition diary, a sleep diary. It would all be there. And watching a game with him, he was really, really analytical and critical too. But the ability of the boys to watch their own game, to sit down and to go through it with somebody, helped them improve further. And we would see huge leaps from each session we did because we were able to go through this with them. But the boys themselves would often go off and watch the game, their own game on their own with their notebook. They'd learn from it and they'd come back with questions all the time. They were curious. They were curious about things. How could they get better? How could they get better? What about this? What about that? And if you look at these questioning strategies, all these things, how we frame questions, it really is exactly how it is in the classroom as well. Asking open-ended questions, giving people responsibility for their own learning. It was often, as I said, problem solving we would do, small-sided games. How do you solve this problem? One of the things we would do in the backs, for instance, we would look at different defensive systems because we had an idea how Wales might defend and how Italy might defend and how France might defend, because for a number of years they defended the same way. And then one year, Wales changed the way that they defended. So the boys had to come up with solutions on the cuff. So in the breaks of the games, they'd come together. But because we'd done lots of this problem solving together, they were able to come back and talk about it. I guess the final thing we would talk about, the lesson we learn, is that sense of performance, because ultimately what we're doing, that sense of focusing on the basics, that relentless focus on the basics, but at a high level, that sense of togetherness and that preparation, ultimately it comes down to performance. And what we were trying to do as coaches, what the players were trying to do for each other, was produce a platform for them to perform as individuals, and then a platform for them to perform in their units, the forwards or the backs. And finally, a platform for them to perform as a team. And this game here is in the following year from the one that I showed you, which was in 2007. This is 2008, and we're playing in France, and we're playing at Lyon, and we're playing against a French side which was huge. And we hadn't performed as well as we should have done in our two previous games against Wales and against Italy. We'd beaten Italy, but it was an underwhelming performance, and the boys knew this. And before this game, we usually showed videos, cuts to encourage the boys. Before this, we showed them the famous Henry V speech from Agincourt, and they turned up. And this is one of the performances of which I'm most proud of the team that I was associated with.
The higher you build your barriers, the taller I become. The farther you take my rights away, the faster I will run. You can deny me, you can decide to turn your face away. No matter, 'cause there's something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. Though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. to hear my voice, the louder I will sing. You hide behind walls of Jericho, our lies will come tumbling. Deny my place and time, you squander wealth that's mine. My light will shine so brightly it will blind you, 'cause there's something inside so strong, so strong. I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Brothers and sisters, when they insist we're just not good enough, when we know better, just look them in the eyes and say, we're gonna do it anyway. Gonna do it anyway. Something inside so strong. And I know that I can make it, though you're doing me wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Oh no. Something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Brothers and sisters, when they insist we're just not good enough, when we know better, just look them in the eyes and say, we're gonna do it anyway. 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 Inside so strong. I know that I can make it. Wrong, so wrong. You thought that my pride was gone. Something inside so strong. Something inside so strong. I know that I can make it. Wrong. That my pride was gone. Oh no, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Oh, something inside so strong. Something inside so strong.
So just to finish with some concluding remarks, it was a privilege for me to work with such talented players. We had that relentless focus on the basics to perform at the highest level, that sense of togetherness, preparation, make the most of your opportunities, both as an individual, as a team, and from there you'll be able to get performance. And I'd say the same about the coaching team as well. They were all amateurs, they were all teachers, but there was a huge sense of professionalism. As we asked the high standards from the players, we expect the same from ourselves. There was criticism of each other. It's not personal, it's because we wanted to get better, and we would take each other on and point out deficiencies in things that we had done because we wanted to improve, and a focus on self-improvement too. but there was that sense of camaraderie amongst the coaching team too, just like there was amongst the players. And indeed, some of those people are some of my closest friends now, even though I've stopped coaching England 10 years ago. Anyway, I hope that was a little insight into what it's like to work with talented players, and in particular, what we do. But now I'm going to hand over to Faye, I think, who's going to lead us on question and answer. So Faye, over to you.
So we're now going to open up to some questions that have hopefully been coming through. I'm unable to see the chat function, but I could start off by saying my question that I have for you. So I guess I'm curious to know if you were surprised about any of the boys that you coached that perhaps did or didn't make it, and if so, then why do you think that is?
Yeah, thanks, Faye. Great question. So I guess with regards backs, it's slightly easier to have picked backs than forwards because rugby's a late maturation sport. So there's some players who maybe large at 16 who don't necessarily kick on. But in terms of the backs, I mean, you could spot the players. You'll have seen the videos. You'll have seen people like, George Ford and Owen Farrell. You can tell that they were, special players. In that the last game against France, the right winger is Alex Lewington, who plays for Saracens. The left winger is Sam Edgley, who played for England Sevens. So, you could see those players, a mile off, and they're exceptionally talented. But in that team as well, there's a number 15, a guy called Joe Cobden, and he was as talented as them. And if you'd have asked the coaches at the time, they'd have said he would have had just the same career as those other guys, but he didn't make it. And it shows that sometimes the game's based around fine margins. I mean, he played professional rugby and he played in the championship for Nottingham. But he is the biggest surprise that he didn't go on and make it. And as coaches, we still meet up for reunions and we reminisce. And here's the name that always comes up, and we're surprised he didn't make it.
Okay, David, so we've got another two questions in the chat box.
Sure.
The first is, what do you believe is the greatest challenge young people in sport face today?
I think the greatest challenge young people in sport face today is to remember it should be enjoyable, because they started playing the sport because they enjoyed it. We all start playing sport, and hopefully most of us continue playing sport because we enjoy it. And in many sports, the higher you get, the more pressure people are under, and it becomes perhaps harder to enjoy it. And that's why we spoke about that sense of togetherness, that sense of celebration. We would say, do things, celebrate things. But I think, young people can be put under huge pressure to achieve, and they often begin to lose the love of the game, and then they keep doing it because it's something they've always done. But if you lose that sense of enjoyment, I think it's really, really hard. I wasn't the player that so many of those people I've showed you were, but I went through a spell in my sixth form where I stopped enjoying playing rugby. I was playing in the under-17 Wales development team, and I knew I wasn't going to quite make it as a rugby player. I could have made a living, but not a life from it. And I was put under pressure to keep travelling up to Wales every weekend to train, and I decided I didn't want to do that, and I found it tough. But then I went back to play a game of club rugby, got stood on the head and required some stitches, and thought, what a great game rugby is, let's go back and keep playing it. But I think keeping that sense of enjoyment, remember why you played it in the first place. And many of those guys or boys that you've seen on the screen who've gone on to make it, we occasionally get to see them, if we're at Twickenham or so, and they come up to us, and they remember with great joy their time with the 16s, because it was a time when they loved the game and they loved what they were doing. And sometimes it's a hard slog to keep doing that, but I think that's the greatest challenge.
Thank you. And second question, what characteristics are required to be an effective teacher within rugby?
I think you have to have high standards, and you need to set expectations. you need to be relentlessly positive with people as individuals, at the same time as being able to criticize their techniques so that they understand that the reason you're putting them under pressure, the reason you're challenging them, is not because you don't like them, it's because you actually love them and you want them to be as good as they can be. So that's the key. To have those high standards, you also need to understand what excellence looks like, and I think that's the biggest challenge for people, is what does excellence look like? Because we use words all the time like that's great, that's really good, and I'm not always sure that's right, because you know, if you're Daniel Cipriani or Owen Farrell and you're throwing flat 30-meter passes off both hands, I think you could probably legitimately say that's pretty special for somebody who's 15, 16. If you can't do that, then maybe we shouldn't use the word great. Maybe we should say that's better, that's better, that's better, because it's accurate and it's also encouraging, and it allows the person to understand that there's further room for growth. So I think those are the things you need. You need to understand what excellent is. You need to be prepared to criticise, but you need to be relentlessly positive, so that the players understand that you're doing it because you want them to be better, because you care about them, not because you're nasty or gruff, or because you just want to criticise them for the sake of criticising them. It's because you know how good they can be. And by the way, I think that's exactly the same for being a teacher in an academic subject as well.
Okay. The next question is, what do you think is the best thing that parents of an upcoming sportsman or woman can do to support their child?
That's a great question. I think there's two things. The first one is when you watch your child play sport, at the end of the game, just say, I really enjoyed watching you today, and just leave it at that. I really enjoyed watching you today. I see lots of parents, you know, speak to their child and they come off, and a bit later they're giving them a debrief about what they should have done and how they should have done things differently. I just don't think that there's a coach there for that, and that's the role of the coach. As a parent, I really enjoyed watching you play today. And the second thing, and I'm enormously grateful to my parents, particularly my father, is the taxi service which takes you around to various coaching sessions, matches all over the country. I mean, my father spent weekends watching me on Saturdays play for school, and then driving me on Sundays to play county rugby all round the country, in different seasons for different sports. And he would take his briefcase with him, and he'd sit in the car on his own doing work, and then come and watch me, and then have to drive me back as I promptly fell asleep because I was knackered. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older that I appreciated him all the more for what he'd done. So those two things. I really enjoyed watching you play today. And secondly, thank you very much indeed for all the transport.
Thank you. Okay, another question. How do you coach an athlete that is struggling to improve?
I think it's different depending on what it is that they're struggling to improve in. So partly you can do visualization. Partly one of the things is to show them some of the power of video analysis. You know, I'm no cricket coach. I coached teams when I was at Dulwich, but I wouldn't call myself a cricket coach. But I had all this video analysis software that I was using for England. So one of the things we would do is video the boys in the nets, and then I was able to put up I would say, who's a player that you admire, you know, who somebody you try and base your game on. Somebody might say, I don't know, Ricky Ponting. So then what I could do is get footage of Ricky Ponting and put it up alongside them. They could compare each other, and that sense of visualization. You need to break it down, obviously, as well, because often that's the thing. I mean, if I look at somebody goal kicking in rugby, often it's a case of breaking it down, but helping them visualize it too as well. It could be a mental challenge as well. So it really does depend on the challenge, but what you need to do is have that sense of communication with the individual to really get to understand them and seek to help them. And that's one of the things that we were able to do with England Rugby, because we spent time together. You could spend time with individuals, seek to break their game down, help them improve in the areas that they were stuck with, and see it improve, and also understand that improvement is not going to necessarily be instant. It's going to take place over time, and encourage those small steps. Still always saying that's better, and not that's great, because it still might not be great.
Thank you. So we have time for one more question, and then I'll hand back over to Faye to close the event. So this question is from a pupil, and it says, how do you dedicate time to sport whilst balancing academic studies too?
So that the players that I showed you, many of them were also academic pupils as well. And one of the players there is Jamie Gibson, who went on to study at Oxford University. It's simple. Time management is crucial, but it's about not wasting time as well. And it's also about accepting that you have to make certain sacrifices. So I think, one of the things that I was fortunate, because of the university I went to, is you learn that you needed to focus on tasks. So the tasks were academic tasks, sporting tasks, and then some degree of socialisation. But my knowledge of daytime TV wasn't particularly strong, whereas I spoke to other friends in other universities who would know a lot more about what was going on in daytime TV. So it's a sense of prioritisation. If you will want to do this, devote the time to it. There are things that can be cut out from what you do each day and each week that aren't helping you in your academic studies. They aren't necessarily helping you be a better sports person, and they're not necessarily helping you relax. And that might mean you may be missing on the latest series on Netflix or Amazon Prime or whichever other channel you're watching on, but your sport is improving and your academic studies are going. And when we were away with England, because we were all school teachers, we made the boys sit down and focus on their homework and focus on their revision. The tournaments were always over the Easter holidays, and they would have to bring revision materials with them, and we'd encourage them to revise, because we were all school teachers, and what was important to us was playing sport at the highest level and doing well in their academic studies, not necessarily watching programs which weren't helping in either of those two tasks. So it's a sense of prioritisation and time management.
So thanks very much, sir. And I'd also like to say thank you to everyone joining us tonight. Keep your eyes out for future speaker series events. Our next one is in December with an old Portmouthian, Alistair Taylor, and he's talking about the psychology of marketing, which will be really interesting. So thank you everyone for joining, and we all really hope you enjoyed it.